Good morning and happy Monday. We have a great show for you all today. I'm joined, of course, by the great Emily Jashinsky. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, Ryan. It's good to be here. And we do have a fantastic lineup this morning. Colin Rogero and Rena Shah are in for Team Rising. We're going to get into Ghislaine Maxwell's really bizarre tell-all interview with the Daily Mail on the conditions of her jail cell. If you haven't read it, it's very strange. Now, contributing editor at Jacobin, also Matt Karp, he's here to discuss the publication's recent study on working class voters and what it'll take to secure their votes come election cycles. But first, Alyssa Farah, who you all probably know from her time here on Rising, is predicting that her former boss, Mike Pence, will run against Donald Trump in 2024, citing shame from Pence over January 6th and going sideways with Trump after confirming Joe Biden's presidential win. So Farah, who actually served as Pence's press secretary from 2017 to 2019, said that Pence hopes to court Trump's base as well as Republican voters who were, quote, alienated by Trump. Ryan, what do you make of that prediction? Do you think coming from Alyssa, it means that this is something that's really serious?
I think so. I mean, she knows what she's talking about with that crew. She's worked for both of them.
Right.
And she also, Trump in some ways, brought this on himself. Lindsey Graham and others begged Trump after his little putsch failed to make up with Pence.
Yeah.
Your crew was out there chanting that they were going to hang the guy. You left him to hang out to dry for hours in the Capitol. You've been dogging him publicly and privately for months. You asked him, as Lindsey Graham said, you asked him to do more than he could do. So just make up with him. Say you're sorry. And Trump's like, no. not doing that. So Pence, maybe he wants to kamikaze his way through this. I don't see him winning a nomination, but he could do some damage.
I was going to say, that's what's interesting to me about what Alyssa said, is that actually Pence's lane in his mind and his advisor's mind might be the almost anti-Trump lane. And that's kind of hard to conceive of because that's impossible. But it's impossible with this Republican base right now. But it's also not sort of how Mike Pence talks about that administration. It's certainly not how he talks about January 6th. So I don't know what that lane would actually be. I can understand how, it's true that there were some Republicans that were absolutely alienated by Donald Trump and unhappy with everything that happened on January 6th, of course. I don't know that really leaves much of an opening for Mike Pence in 2024. But what is interesting to me is that their schism may have actually pushed Pence into running because, you say there are other people that have to be alienated too.
And you would know this better than me, but my guess would be that Pence might think he has the evangelical vote locked up because of his long career and service on behalf of that movement. But I'm not so sure. I think he might be a little shocked when he comes to find out which if it were just those two, which candidate evangelicals would go for. But you would know that better. Wouldn't they lean more Trump?
Yeah, there's no question. And I don't think actually that Mike Pence...
Which is amazing.
It is. But I don't think Mike Pence has any illusions about that. I think Mike Pence and his team very much know that. And that's what's interesting to me about this. It's, they're pretty firmly aware, everybody in the Republican Party is pretty firmly aware that there's this huge chunk of the voters who actually are more loyal to Donald Trump than they are to the Republican Party. I've talked to plenty of people at Trump rallies and everything. If he left the Republican Party, would you vote for Trump or the Republican? The answer is always, always, always Trump, as is to be expected. So thinking that there's a slice of the primary voting base that would go for Mike Pence, I think is strange. And I don't know if this is just something, it's early, that they're exploring. I think a lot of people are exploring it and talking about it, and that's the extent of their plans. But it's interesting.
Right. Well, speaking of Republican presidential candidates, Tulsi Gabbard was on Fox News recently.
Yeah.
And, she has, for a long time, was kind of a kind of contrarian within Democratic circles, but she always had, a foot in the Democratic Party, or she would use lingo, or she would frame her position in left-wing terms. Even as that position itself kind of drifted more conservative and conservative. Recent appearance on Fox News, when she was asked about the Build Back Better Act, she dropped all of the pretense. It's just pure, uncut, Reaganism. So let's take a look. This is Tulsi Gabbard
Here's the reality with the bill that they're continuing to push forward is that our government is too powerful and too big even as it is, and this bill is only going to make matters worse. The provisions in the bill are so vague that really it's going to be unelected bureaucrats who end up deciding how these provisions are implemented, and no accountability. And really it'll empower them to be able to stick their noses into every aspect of our lives, furthering this cradle to grave mentality of government dependence that makes us lose even more of our autonomy as we are paying for it. As government gets bigger, our wallets are getting smaller.
Hey, as government's getting bigger, our wallets are getting smaller.
Oh, great line.
Cradle to grave dependency. Listen, I like it. Right? It's what's interesting.
And she's talking to you. She's not talking to me anymore.
Well, yeah, she's definitely not talking to you anymore. And that's because, so what's interesting to me about this is that I've been waiting sort of for Democrats to jump on that because does it sound like uncut Reaganism, as you said? Yes. But actually, it sounds like the Democratic Party up until very recently. And it sounds like Bill Clinton. It sounds like the way a lot of Democrats would react if you explained, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, what Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda looks like. That's how a lot of Democrats would have reacted. But with the IRS provision, for instance, what Republicans and Democrats alike have criticized for allowing the IRS to snoop into people's personal bank accounts, all of these things, this bill does have a whole lot of power grabs in it. That is absolutely true. And I've been sort of waiting to see if there would be Democrats, if you can call Tulsi Gabbard, if you can sort of consider her a Democrat to an extent anymore. I've been sort of waiting to see if Democrats would jump on that. Someone.
Right, and that's fine. And I think there should be power grabs in it because it's a power struggle. It's if you're trying to make life more bearable for middle class and working class people, you're going to have to take some resources from society and redirect them towards child care subsidies, toward child care tax credits. If you're going to try to reverse the direction of the fossil fuel industry, that's a power struggle. And you're going to have to grab power from them, and you're going to have to put power into renewable and clean energy. So yeah, I'm fine with that. But so Tulsi has gone through an extraordinary evolution, but I think that she has been looking at this. I don't think this is a kind of a new, opportunistic thing. I think she's been moving in this direction for quite some time. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, and the control room can correct me. She voted against impeaching Donald Trump the first time.
Was it the first time or the second time?
She would have been out by the second time because she didn't run for re-election. But as I recall, she voted against impeaching Trump. And I think that she has been keeping open alliances with the right in a very strategic way. Did she vote present? Is that what it was? Yeah. I remember that she did something where it's like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So at that point, so that was December or whatever of 2019. So it's like she wasn't quite ready. She's still running for president as a Democrat. Yeah. So she's not quite ready to go. So present is an interesting vote there. She has taken this what looks like an anti-war stand, but whenever you listen to her, she's anti-regime change wars. She always adds regime change wars. That's an interesting qualification. So what wars are you okay with? It turns out she's okay with the entire global war on terror. And this isn't something she's ever hidden before. And so that fits in with the kind of Trump populist base. Toward the end of her time, she started pushing a bunch of anti-abortion stuff, her end of time in Congress.
Yes.
So I think you add all this together, and she's looking at either running for president as a Republican in 2024 or appearing on every short list for a Republican presidential candidate. From your perspective, as somebody who's on the right, is she fantasizing, or has she built enough popularity with this element of the Republican base and through her Fox News appearances, everything else, that a Republican would be like, yeah, let's own the libs by putting a former lib on the ticket who was a veteran and
Well, that impulse is very strong, and I think she understands it because Republicans do have this, and conservatives more broadly have this impulse to say anybody who was sort of fashionable on the left, who is now legitimizing us, we must latch onto and welcome with open arms because it does legitimize us and it makes us feel validated, and it gives us some credibility. That said, I don't even know that Tulsi Gabbard's real appeal is with the Republican base. I think she's actually genuinely appealing to the alienated center. And whether or not that's correct is a different question. But I think she's saying, like, listen, I don't fit neatly into any box. The Democratic Party has changed a lot. Some people say for better, some people say for worse. She says for worse. And there are a lot of people exactly like her who are floating between parties right now, who are anti-establishment and have this hodgepodge of views that no longer sort of congeals into an ideology sort of coherently as the establishment wants them to. And so I think it's true. She knows that to be in power going forward, she needs to be on the right and not on the left, because any of her heterodox views on cultural issues will immediately disqualify her from any position, anything like that. On the right, no. It'll be quite the opposite. People will welcome her and be happy to have her.
A lot of them are orthodox views.
Yeah. Right.
Particularly, there's a lot of hostility there. She's always attacking political Islam. Like, she speaks in kind of religious war, type clash of civilization type terms from like the late 90s, early 2000s in a very kind of odd way, but that fits much better in a Republican primary than a Democratic one. It's
interesting because, it fits better there, but like, where does it actually fit?
Right.
I mean, and that's where I think she does. That's where I think she does have a lot of appeal for people who do have this hodgepodge of views. It's not like they're down ticket. It's interesting. I think she's really sort of carving out her niche to represent people that are similarly have been left behind by one party but still don't fit perfectly in another.
Right. Ideology's up for grabs at this point, it feels like. And so she can fit wherever.
Yeah. Totally agree.
And we will tell you what's on our radars up next.